Welcome to the NFL MVP Momentum Podcast. I'm Sam Holcroft alongside Payton Thompson. Before we begin, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Momentum MVP, follow our Facebook page at MVP Momentum Podcast, and check us out on YouTube at MVP Momentum Podcast. So this week, we're just going to do a Week 5 preview and predictions while also recapping last week. So, Payton, like I said at the end of the podcast last week, you were due, and boy, were you. You're now at the top with 52 points with a 46-18 record. I am 1 point behind you with a 41-23 record. Zeke is a point behind me with a 42-22 record. Sean holds the same record but has 49 points. So let's look at the games last week. Payton, 15-1. The only game you got wrong was you picked the Dolphins over the Bills. I mean, that's probably the closest that we'll get to someone getting a perfect week. But dang, you disagreed with a lot of games, a lot of 2-2 splits, a lot of I think you were 3-0 when you were the only one that disagreed with the rest of the group. So you clutched up, and also you got your second upset of the year, and you got your second double down of the year. So that'll help with climbing up in those standings.
Yeah, for sure. I felt pretty good about my picks last week. I didn't think I was gonna be 15-1, but I felt pretty good about my picks. I kind of was going against the grain a little bit, but I didn't shy away. I went with what I felt was right with my picks, and it paid off. So I'm happy to be sitting on top of the standings with a great record going into week 5.
Yeah, I will say though, there was about when was it? Was it? I think it was about a day before.
Gonna bring this up, man.
You you originally had the Falcons, but the day before you were like, I got to change to the Jaguars, and I'm like, okay, fine, I'll let you do it this time. If I didn't, well, I mean, you'd still be on top because you'd have the tiebreaker, but the head-to-head, but we'd have the same amount of points. So all I'm saying is, if you win this whole thing and you win $50 from each of us because I let you change your pick, I think I might need a little bit of my money back.
Well, you might just I don't know, man. You'll just know in your heart that I didn't deserve that one, you know what I mean?
All right. Well, PT, since you're on top, let's go ahead and we'll kick it off with our overreaction Mondays, and you're on top, so you can go first.
All right, man. We're gonna go with a guy that's been pretty hot on Twitter this last couple weeks, and that's CJ Stroud. I've seen a lot of film from him these past few weeks, and I gotta say, man, I've seen a lot of good things from him, and he's making me a believer that he should have went number 1 overall. I know it's still really early in the season, but I gotta say, when you compare him against the last 3 or 4 seasons of rookie quarterbacks, he's got to be up there, at least top 3, top 4, and how he's looked and kind of how he's approached the game. With a brand new head coach and Amico Ryans. I don't think anyone had Nico Collins or Tank Dell as wide receiver 1 or 2s, and obviously they have Robert Woods, and they have their run game that's pretty solid with Damian Pierce, but it's nothing crazy. And they've gotten Dalton Schultz, and that defense is kind of doing what they need to do to stay in games. So he's looked really good, I think, especially when you consider his circumstances with the team and just kind of the expectations. I don't think anyone was expecting the Texans to be very good this year. But them trading their pick for Will Anderson and getting him, and then also being able to win games with a rookie quarterback like CJ Stroud. I think it's going to do a lot for his confidence going into the future, going into the rest of the season, and I think he has a pretty good chance to win Offensive Rookie of the Year as well. So I got to say I've been really impressed, and I think he could be a top 3 rookie quarterback in the last five seasons.
Yeah, and I feel like, with the thing with CJ Stroud is like out of the 3 quarterbacks that were taken in the first 4 picks of the draft, I feel like CJ's been the one that's been a little bit overlooked. Bryson was the number 1, and Anthony Richardson got picked at 4 with the Colts, but Anthony had a fairly nice game 1, and has looked pretty good. And I think like people look at those physical attributes and go googly eyes over it. But CJ Stroud has had probably the best games out of those 3 almost every week, realistically. So I think that CJ Stroud being a top 3 quarterback, top 3 rookie quarterback over the last 5 years, is pretty valid. I wouldn't say it's too much of an overreaction, but I mean, other than Justin Herbert and Baker Mayfield, he's definitely on pace to be competing with some of those numbers.
Yeah, definitely.
So my overreaction is that the Bills' success is dependent on Josh Allen's play. So we all knew what happened game one. You faced the Jets, you turned the ball over 4 times, and they lost, only putting up 16 points. Since then, he has not only just one interception, but hasn't fumbled at all. He had 2 fumbles against the Jets and has had 0 the rest of the year. 1 he lost, 1 he recovered, and just 1 interception. He has had 8 touchdowns to 1 interception in the last 3 games. And they have put up 37, 38, and 48 points against some, I wouldn't say like bad defenses. They're decent defenses. The Raiders, I mean, they have a good pass rush, but secondary is horrible. Scored 38 points. The Commanders' defense isn't too bad. They're definitely middle of the pack, but they put up 37 points there, and they put up 48 points on a very good Miami defense. So they are very dependent on Josh Allen's play, because if Josh Allen plays bad, they're not going to be able to maintain the number 1 seed in the AFC, like I predicted.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Sam, I got one question for you. And I think is this really an overreaction? Because I feel like, specifically the last 2 years, Josh Allen's play really dictates how this team operates and, how far they can go, whether it's the regular season or it's in the playoffs. And I think for a guy that's as talented as Josh Allen with his arm, with his mobility, with his, you know, leadership at times, I think the one thing that can hold him back is the turnovers. And so when he takes a step back, doesn't, force things too hard, doesn't, try to go for, all these passing yard stats, these touchdowns, these long chunk plays. I think when he just plays a little bit more methodical, kind of slows things down like a point guard, you don't really need to rush things all the time. Like it's kind of like if you're comparing like Russell Westbrook and Chris Paul. I think Westbrook is going to be able to put up all these crazy stats in his prime, but it may not acclimate, all these wins. But it's like you could have a guy like Chris Paul, where it's going to be a lot slower, a lot more methodical. He might not have all the crazy box score stats, but he's going to have the wins. And they're equally, as talented, some could argue, but one guy has a far superior gap in IQ in winning. And so I think that, is a pretty good example of how Josh Allen just kind of needs to take a step back and do a little bit less sometimes, because he has all the talent in the world. And, this defense has been pretty solid these last couple years. And even when he's not, on his, having a great game, even having an average game for himself, they can still win games. But if he's having a bad game, then, things don't tend to go well for them, especially when it's a big game against the Chiefs, Dolphins, Chargers, really any of the top teams, So he kind of has to be the leader of their team. And when he plays well and plays smart, I think they're at their best.
Yeah, just to rebuttal real fast, I will say this you know, of Josh Allen's play. They do ride high on Josh Allen a lot, but let's look at the last 3 seasons and how their season ended. They played against the Bengals. He had 260 some passing yards, uh, no touchdowns, 1 interception, but he had 26 rushing yards and a touchdown. The rest of his team had 38 rushing yards. So he had almost 50% of the rushing yards. They could not run in a game where it was snowing against the Bengals. The Bengals were able to throw a decent amount, and Joe Mixon also had 100 yards. You can't blame Josh Allen on that, and you couldn't say that Josh Allen's play dictated, because he was 25 for 42, but he still threw for 264, which is more than what Burrow threw for. Then the year before that, they lose in the divisional to the Chiefs, where the defense gave up 36 points in regulation, and then the touchdown in overtime to make it 42. So yeah, Josh Allen had a good game, but that wasn't dependent on that. And then you can look at the year before, where they played the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, where he had 287 yards, 2 touchdowns, an interception. He also had 88 yards rushing. The team had 129. So the rest of his team had 41 yards rushing. So in the last 3 years, you can't really say that they lost because of Josh Allen. But as of right now, I think it's an overreaction because they are dependent on Josh Allen's play.
Before we go on to Zeke's point, which I'm going to back up, I want to say that I think this year things may be a little bit different because I think James Cook is kind of their guy at running back. So if they don't capitalize on having him and kind of utilizing him as a true running back, then maybe you have to look at Sean McDermott and the staff at that point because you're right. The run game is definitely a valid point, but I don't think Devin Singletary is a bad running back. I think James Cook is an above average running back. So if they're not able to scheme things up when they need to at most, then maybe we have to start looking at the coaching staff.
Yeah, well, they don't even have Singletary anymore. I think it's
Right.
James Cook and Damian Harris.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Which I mean, Damian Harris isn't a bad running back either. I would say
yeah.
he's a very fine backup.
Yep.
So for Zeke's point here, he's gonna say that the 49ers are the best team in the NFL right now. And if I'm being quite honest with you, I don't really think this is overreaction at all. I think it's pretty valid. I think what you have to do when you talk about the best teams in the NFL, when you're talking specifically top 3, 4, 5, I think you have to break it down into weaknesses. What teams have the most glaring weaknesses and kind of go about it that way? Because I think that's kind of what you do when you look at, uh, I don't know, player comparisons or really comparing anything. You look at who has the most strengths and who has the most weaknesses. And every good NFL team, every top 5 NFL team is going to have a ton of strengths that they can go off of and make their case. But who has the least amount of weaknesses? It's got to be San Francisco because I think their biggest weakness going into the season was their quarterback question mark, and I think Brock Purdy has shown that he can be that guy. He has, I believe, the number one QBR this season through 4 games. He's pretty much doing exactly what the system calls for. Christian McCaffrey's been great. They've been healthy for the most part. That's a big thing for them, defensively and offensively. I think Kyle Shanahan is just doing what he does best, and I think they really believe that last year they were one of the better teams in the NFL, especially after the McCaffrey trade. And so I think this is just them coming back this season and really making that statement because I feel like they do have a chip on their shoulder. I feel like they thought that a lot of people didn't think that they were a top 2, top 3 team in the NFL this year, and I really do think that at this point and throughout the season, they're going to be the best team in the NFL, and they are my NFC champion favorite.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. So I feel like that, you know, I think this really is an overreaction like you, but you also got to think from Zeke's perspective because he thinks the Eagles are the best team in the NFL. So that's why he probably thinks this is an overreaction. So,
But I mean, you can have your bias, but then you can also recognize that the Eagles really have not looked the greatest. They really haven't looked as good as they were last year, and this is kind of what I pointed out earlier in the podcast, and also, I believe a couple weeks ago is that I believe that the Eagles are due for regression, and every single week they've kind of looked like that.
yep.
So I mean, I think you can be biased, but you can also be realistic in realizing that the 49ers, although they've played a few teams that don't have the best record so far, the Eagles have not looked as good as the 49ers.
Yeah, I can agree with that. So for Sean's overreaction, our 3 have all been kind of mild, but this one is a hot one. So Mike Tomlin is on the hot seat if they cannot turn this around. So everyone is calling for Matt Canada to get fired. He is the problem in Pittsburgh. They are lucky that they are 2-0 right now, or sorry, 2-2 right now. If Josh McDaniels knew how to coach, the Raiders could have beaten them last week. And then the week before, when they beat the Browns, it took Nick Chubb having that horrific injury for the Browns to just fall apart. So, the Steelers could easily be 0-4 right now. And at some point, like, you can blame the offensive coordinator, but as much as, Mike Tomlin has done such a good job, never had a losing season, but like when was the last time that the Steelers were like actually relevant? It's been a while since they've been like a two
Yeah.
seed. I think, they were a 3 seed in 2019, 2020, I think it was. But no one took them seriously, and they lost to the 6 seed Cleveland Browns in the first round. So it's, you know, yeah, they had an easy schedule, but at some point you got to look, and Mike Tomlin's done a lot of good stuff for the Steelers, but just talking from kind of like Sean's point of view, you know, you can blame the offensive coordinator all you want, but like the head coach is also one to blame.
So here's my kind of breakdown of it. I feel like defensively, they've had a couple games where they've been really ugly, very sloppy. And like you said, the Nick Chubb injury, you kind of had to factor into play with that, of the one game that they held them to 18. And that game they were fine defensively against the Browns. There was one other game, I believe, against the Raiders as well. And I feel like if you are allowing on average 18 points per game, you're probably going to win that game more times than not, if you have a competent offense. Now, I don't think a lot of their problems are on defense, so I think you kind of have to look at the offense, and that's where Matt Canada comes in. Now, the issue that I have with the team personally is I just believe that they don't have a lot of talent. And that might be kind of a, I don't know, very mild take, because I mean, you kind of, you look at an offense, they're not producing well, then you kind of go, they don't have talent. But I think there's a big difference between a team. I'm going to kind of reference my team here. There's a difference between a team like the Falcons, who you can tell they have all this talent on the field and they're just not producing, versus a team like the Steelers, where it's like, okay, you're relying on a second year quarterback who still, I believe, there's question marks out on. You're relying on Najee Harris to get back to his, I believe, his first or second season production. Last year he was horrible, and this year pretty much the same thing. I mean, a continuation. Obviously, as the season went on later in the season for them last year, he got a little bit better. But who's to say that wasn't, players resting? Who's to say that wasn't just, I don't know, end of the season kind of fluky stuff? So, I don't think necessarily this team has a whole lot of talent. You talk about the guys on the outside. I like Pat Freiermuth, but he's not a game-breaking tight end. He's not a tight end that's going to change the offensive game around. I think George Pickens is a very physical downfield blocker, but I don't think he's going to be a guy that's going to go in the air and catch balls and run all these crisp routes or anything like that. So I just believe that they have a lack of a true passing quarterback. I think they have a lack in a true running game. I think they have, and their offensive line doesn't do them any help either. And I think they have a really big question mark on any downfield playmakers. So to me, it's like, how much are you really going to be able to work with this offense? And I think Mike Tomlin is historically known for working with teams that don't have the most talent. But at some point, it's just like, how much can you really do year after year and getting your teams to positive records? You're kind of due for a year where it doesn't go right. Things don't go your way. So, yeah, it's a bit of an overreaction for me. I can see it if you're looking from it from the outside, but I think if you were to watch the Steelers, I don't think firing Mike Tomlin would do anything for them. If anything, it would set them back, 2 or 3 years for me. So, yeah, I don't think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. So that wraps up the Overreaction Mondays. We'll go ahead and get into our picks here. We only got 14 games this week with the Browns, Buccaneers, Chargers, and Seahawks all having byes. So, PET, you're at the top of the leaderboard. What's your upset of the week?
Yeah, so this was a tough one for me, my upset of the week, but it was really the only upset that I felt pretty much all the way confident with, and it was the Patriots over the Saints. And Sam brought it up before off air that I've kind of got against the Saints historically this season, and nothing really changes for me at this point. I just don't feel like the Saints' offensive rhythm is really there. I think defensively they can stay in games, but I think when it comes down to it, when it comes down to crunch time, you talk about Derek Carr's health. I mean, really like that Kamara is coming back. This is his second week back. He gets his legs under him. I think the Patriots defense isn't the greatest defense to kind of get going against. But it's a lot better than who they're playing last week. I don't remember off the top of my head. But I mean, he's kind of having a little bit harder road to come back from, but I do like the addition there. I just don't I don't completely believe in Derek Carr, especially when he's kind of dealing with that AC shoulder sprain, that he's going to be able to get a win over the Patriots, who, Christian Gonzalez has been a great corner for them. Obviously, Bill Belichick is, obviously he's known for his great offenses, but he's a great defensive coach as well, and I don't think any of their games have been that far apart. And I think him benching Mac Jones shows that they want to win. They don't really care about tanking or development. Bill Belichick doesn't care about any of that next year's stuff. He's old. He's trying to win right now. So, he's going to do everything in his power to win this game. And the Patriots, are also at home. So I feel like it, kind of just spells an upset.
Yeah. And Zeke, Sean, and I all went with the Saints here. I think we just believe that Alvin Kamara made that offense look a lot better than it has been. But I just feel like last year Derek Carr was still trying to probably still a little sore. He probably shouldn't have played. He only threw for 127 yards with 62% completion, no touchdowns, no picks. But yeah, they just need to give him time. Like if that means he needs to sit this week, but they're trying to win now. So, and when this Patriots team gave up 38 points, I believe, last week, this is an offense that, could take that and roll with that for the rest of the season if they can do what the Cowboys did to the Patriots. So my upset of the week is also Sean's upset of the week. He wants to be a little copycat, so but that's okay. We got the Cardinals and Bengals, and guess what? We're split, and we already know who the two that picked the Cardinals is. So Sean and I picked the Cardinals. The Cardinals. I talked 2 weeks ago. When it was 0-2 teams, and if it's time to panic, I said it is time to panic if you're the Cardinals because you are getting too close to winning games. And what did they do week 3? They beat the Cowboys. The Cowboys have looked like the most dominant team for every game that they've played except for the Cardinals. And what did the Cardinals do last week? Well, they played who did they play? Played the 49ers, and the 49ers won, I think 35-16 or something like that, but it was really close for most of that game. And you could say that in those power rankings, the 49ers are either 1 or 2 in those power rankings for the season. So, and the Bengals have just not looked good. And if the Bengals lose this, I am worried for Cincinnati.
Yeah, I think for me, and you kind of dispelled it, at the end there. I think it comes down to pressure of the game. I think the Bengals realize that they can't lose this game to a team like the Cardinals. This on their schedule in the beginning of the season was supposed to be one of their gimmies, and if they want any chance to make the playoffs, it has to be now. I believe Joe Burrow being somewhat healthier than the last couple weeks, obviously him being able to play last week and the week before that, I think does matter to the psyche of the team and to him in general. So I don't think it's gonna be. I think it will be close, but I think at the end we're gonna see who the team that wants the game a little bit more. So they had their fun against the Cowboys, but I think the Cardinals are trying to get back on track to tank. So I got the Bengals taking this one.
Yep. And Zeke's upset of the week is the Raiders over the Packers. Another split decision here. So Sean and Zeke are both going with the Raiders over the Packers here. And PT, you and I both have the Packers. I just don't feel like the Raiders secondary is going to be able to hang with some of those receivers, especially if Christian Watson's going to be back. And it's just the Raiders, Jimmy G might play, most likely should play clear after I think he cleared concussion protocols. But this is going to be a Monday night game. A lot of pressure. The Packers just played on Thursday night the week before, so they're going to have a long break. Everything's pointing towards the Packers winning this game.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with everything you said. I think when it comes down to it, I know both teams lost last week, but I just feel like feel like the Packers just have a little bit more fight in them when they're down and when they're up as well. I feel like a lot of the time the Raiders will be in good position to have time to come back. I think teams will let them back in the game and they just kind of won't a lot of the time. And so I think that the Packers are kind of the complete opposite. I think the Packers can be down 15, 18, 21 points, and they have a good chance to come back because I feel like Matt LaFleur, Jordan Love, Aaron Jones and company finally being healthy. Obviously, Christian Watson coming back, and that defense is that defense. I think they always have a chance to come back, and they always have a chance to get up early too. So, like you said, having that extra break time, I think matters too. And I think that loss on Thursday meant a lot to them too, being divisional. I think they want to get one back here.
Yep. So PT, what's your double down for the week?
Yeah, so my double down is pretty standard. It's a team I already talked about, and it's the 49ers. I think that this game is going to be pretty big for the 49ers, mentally for them. I think they're going to want to prove that they're the best team in the NFC. And I think right now I think they also think that it's between them and the Cowboys. I think obviously the Cowboys fell into that trap game against the Cardinals, but they still have a really good record. And so I think they think that this could be a really good time to really solidify that they are the best team in the NFC. So I think the 49ers are going to want this one. Obviously it's at home as well, so that helps. But, I think it may come down to the defenses and what defense is better. I think it's going to be a really good defensive game.
Yeah, because I believe that this was a pretty low scoring game when they played in the playoffs last year. And, this Cowboys defense is looking phenomenal. Well, we all agreed with the 49ers here, but, I would not be surprised if this is a Cowboys win. But so I think it's risky going with the 49ers on your double down, but you just must have that much faith in them.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, like I've said to you, I think the 49ers are the best team. I think the 49ers are the best team in the NFL, so I'm okay with it.
Yeah. Yep. So for my double down for the week, I have the Ravens over the Steelers. And guess what? That copycat Sean wanted to go with the same thing.
Another one.
So yeah, another one. Well, I'll just need to make sure that I pick my stuff last, so he doesn't have to keep copying me. Or maybe I'll
Yeah.
just tell him look at the Excel so he doesn't pick that game. Um, but we all picked the Ravens here over the Steelers. We all kind of have that like, if the Steelers would have won last week against the Texans, they're 3-1. Might have actually considered, but I spent about 2 seconds thinking about this game, and I'm like, Lamar's gonna have a good game. I think that Houston did a fairly good job containing TJ Watt, probably the best that any team's done so far this season. But I still think that, the Ravens are going to hit their stride. I feel like they had a really good game last week with who did they play? They played the Browns, and I think they blew them out too. So a good bounce back after losing to the Colts, a team that they should not have lost to. And I think we all agree that that they're definitely going to have a good day in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of sprinkle in those thoughts about the Steelers that we've said before and their momentum and kind of everything about them is down right now. But I think this is more about the Ravens and kind of their road to getting back to the playoffs and making amends to signing Lamar to that deal and Lamar wanting to show that he deserves that deal as well. But I think like you and me also think they could easily be 4-0 as of right now. If they beat the Colts, they're 4-0. And obviously, right now they're leading the AFC North, and I think that this game is going to show even more why they deserve to be at the top of the AFC North right now with the Bengals being down. I think them knowing as well that if they win this game and the Bengals, lose this weekend, it's a very good start to the season for them. So yeah, we got the Ravens.
Yep. And then Zeke's double down. It's the obvious one. We already knew it was coming. Eagles over
Yeah.
Rams. We all agree that the Eagles are going to win this one. Not that the Rams haven't looked good. They're probably one of the better teams that like we weren't expecting to do too much this year. But I just think that Eagles have been playing to their competition. But what have they done? All 4 games, they've won, and I think that they're going to find another way to do it here.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I don't have too much to add on to this. I think they're just a much more talented team. I think another thing about it too is Matt Stafford, I believe, picked up a bit of an injury last weekend as well, so that doesn't help their case at all because if they don't have Matt Stafford playing and or really playing at his best, I think it makes it really hard for them to get that downfield attack with Tutu and Puka. So, um, yeah, so I think they could be in trouble. I think this could be a blowout as well.
Yeah. So then that wraps up the upsets and double downs. We'll just go through the rest of our picks. So starting with the Thursday night football game, we got the Bears and Commanders. We all agree that the Commanders are going to win this one. You know, they played a really good game against the Eagles, you know, scoring, I think, in the with no time left and forcing overtime. Unfortunately, it didn't go their way in overtime, and the Eagles won. But the Commanders, you know, I thought that they were kind of like a little bit frauds at 2-1, but they played against a Eagles team. You know, how good is that Eagles team really? We'll still kind of figure that out. But I think that, you know, this is definitely a good game, especially after Justin Fields having probably the best game of his season on last week on a short week after, you could say, costing them, even if it wasn't his fault. And I blame Eberflus there, but yeah, I think we all got Commanders without thinking too much about it.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add on to that. I would say though, I gotta wonder what Justin Fields' trade value is right now as a Falcons fan. I gotta wonder what it's at because obviously last week he looked better than he's probably looked all season. But the Bears, man, they just can't win games, you know? And so, them probably gonna have the first overall pick, probably gonna have another top four pick. And this is kind of a discussion for another day, but the draft board is going to look pretty nice, and if they can add a couple more picks to that draft that they have next year, I think it's a recipe for a quick turnaround. I really do.
Yeah. So another 8:30 Central Time game. The Jaguars playing another game overseas. The Bills Jaguars, and we're all going Bills except for Zeke. Zeke's going with the Jaguars. Oh, whoops, sorry. I don't. I can't justify him going Jags. Jags haven't looked all too good, except for their one game against the Falcons last week. But I mean, the Bills, they're riding hot right now. I'm like I said earlier, uh, 38, 37, 48, their last three games. That's all I have to say
Gotta,
about that.
yeah, I gotta be honest with you, man. I don't even think the Jaguars looked particularly good against the Falcons last week. I think the Falcons just looked really bad. I think Ritter having those turnovers, the fumble, two interceptions, just staring down his receivers, and we'll kind of get into that in our next matchup. But I don't think the Jaguars have looked particularly good necessarily. I think when they've played teams that should or could beat them, I think that they've lost. So this doesn't really change much for me, especially with the Bills having one of the best defenses in the NFL.
Yep. So the next two matchups we both agree on, the Texans Falcons. We all have the Texans winning that one, and the Panthers Lions. We all have the Lions winning that one. PT, you're going against the Falcons one more time. Explain why.
I think I think when let me attack it this way. I think that if we had a different quarterback, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm just giving up on Ritter, because I feel like if Ritter has the correct development path, he can be he could be a fine quarterback. I'm not gonna say good. He could be a fine quarterback. He can be a league average backup quarterback. But as of right now, he's just not a very good quarterback. And so when you look at both these teams, I think that the Falcons are slightly better on defense, but the Texans have just shown to be more consistent through the air and on the ground. A little bit less on the ground, obviously, but with a quarterback that's younger, he's just more talented than Ritter, and that's kind of where it starts, right? I mean, I think the Falcons' offensive line is a bit better, but it doesn't really matter if you can't get the ball downfield, anyways. I think in this particular matchup, I think both run games are going to be clicking. So it kind of just comes down to the quarterback battle. And so far, CJ has just shown to be that guy. We kind of talked to him about him earlier in this podcast, but that's kind of what it comes down to me. If we had Teddy, if we had Kirk Cousins, if we had Taylor Heineke starting, I feel like it might be a little bit different, but it's not going to happen. So
Yeah. And then talking about the Lions Panthers, Bryce Young had a I feel like he had an okay game against the Vikings, but just the Vikings wanted that win more, and the Panthers, they don't have their first round pick next year, so you know it's going to be tough to tank. They're going to be definitely be trying against this Lions team, but I think the Lions are just riding the hot hand. They needed that loss against the Seahawks to really kind of spark them up, and I think that they're going to start going on a big tear here.
yeah, me too. I mean, I agree with everything you said. The one thing I do want to say about the Panthers specifically is that I really feel like they're doing such an injustice to Bryce Young right now because whenever I watch the Panthers and watch Bryce Young play, he shows me the eye test shows me that he can be a good quarterback on an average team. But they do such a terrible job as far as Miles Sanders just not being very good, the offensive line not being very good. They don't really scheme up any kind of creative pass plays for him. Frank Reich has not shown to be a good head coach. The defense has been fine, but not anything crazy. So it's like I just feel and like he's a rookie. I mean obviously CJ Stroud's a rookie too. But like Bryce Young is just maybe it's gonna take a little bit longer for him to figure things out. And to maybe D'Amico Ryans is just that much better of a coach than Frank Reich is. Maybe that is what it is. Maybe their free agency signings are maybe just that much better than theirs. I don't know what it is exactly, but whatever it is, I feel like it's just not helping Bryce Young, and that's on the coaching staff. So that's what I got to say about that.
Yep. The next one is the Titans Colts. We have another 2-2 split. Zeke and I are going with the Titans, while you and Sean are both going with the Colts. The Titans, they've been one of the more inconsistent teams this year. I believe they are 2-2, with last week them beating who they beat. They beat they beat the Bengals. They blew out the Bengals. But the week before that, they got blown out by the Browns,
Yeah,
and
and
they
then the
beat the
Saints.
Chargers, and then they lost to the Saints. So like one of the more inconsistent teams last year.
Yeah,
But this is also a game where like I was thinking about potentially the Colts.
yeah. I mean, it's kind of weird you say that. I would say the exact same thing. I would say that between the two, I could see either one winning. But when it comes down to who I want to pick, I'm gonna pick the team I trust more, and I just trust the Colts more than the Titans. That's all it comes down to.
Yep. The next game, the Giants Dolphins, and I think we only need to spend 5 seconds on this one because we all picked the Dolphins. The Giants just do not look good,
Mm-mm.
and the only reason that they won against the Cardinals, uh, was it 2 weeks ago, was because Saquon Barkley showed why he is still Saquon Barkley. But other than that, Daniel Jones has not looked good. The offensive line has not looked good. The receivers have not looked good. Defense, and the Dolphins, they got the reality check last week, and you know if the Dolphins want to be the best team in the AFC or the NFL, they needed a game like that because you can't go your entire season without having that reality check. Like, whoa, okay, there's teams that want to hang with us.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, we don't really have to spend too much time talking about this exact matchup. I think it's pretty obvious, but I want to say specifically to this game, also to the Browns, Vikings. There might be a couple other teams I'm forgetting about, but especially those three teams. This is really doing a lot for the running back market, I feel like, because you look at the Browns losing Nick Chubb. I don't think they've looked the same since losing Nick Chubb. I don't even think as a team that they've responded the best or like had the most confidence or positivity since Nick Chubb's injury. I think losing Dalvin Cook to the Vikings losing Dalvin Cook to the Jets, I think has meant a lot to them as far as being able to win those close games. And so yeah, I think losing those running backs is kind of doing a bit for the market right now, so good for them.
Yep. The next game, Jets Broncos. We only have one person disagreeing there, and that's me. You three all have the Jets. I have the Broncos. I think Sean Payton he's had a rough comeback to his coaching season or his career. After taking a year or so off. But they finally got their first victory, in a game that they realistically shouldn't have came back in. But I think that they're going to kind of figure it out. Zach Wilson had a good game against the Chiefs, you know, um, but I think that the Broncos team just might be riding just a little high on winning, and I think that they might just kind of continue because they need to turn this around because I don't think they have their first round pick for this upcoming year because they think they shipped that in the Russell Wilson trade, so they need to be good. Otherwise, 2 years of bad play with Russell just isn't going to help anyone.
Yeah, I mean you're right. I just think the Broncos are just a really bad team. I think heard some kind of crazy stat today that the Broncos had the worst rated defense since the 0-16 2008 or 9 Lions. So which you wouldn't really expect out of the Broncos typically. But yeah, they've been really bad defensively this year. So yeah.
But you got to also keep in mind that they did have one really, 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 really bad game against the Dolphins where they had more. I'm pretty sure it was
Well,
more 40-yard plays than
one game
the
is one
Broncos
game,
had.
though.
That is true. Very true.
They don't give up. They give up 50 to the Dolphins. It's still 50. You give up
Right.
70.
Yeah. And then the last game is the Chiefs Vikings, and we all agree that the Chiefs will win this one. Even though they did look a little shaky against the Jets, they still came out on top. The Vikings defense just does not look good. Yeah, I don't think there's much to say. Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, they're gonna keep figuring it out.
Yeah, I think the Vikings are going to be on that path of losing another game, and they're going to start looking at Kirk Cousins trades a little bit more seriously.
Yeah, definitely. So that wraps up our Week 5 preview and predictions. So PT, last week I said that you were due to climb at the top of the standings. We've all had our week in the sunlight now. Are you going to be the first one to retain your your standings or your being at the top of the standings?
You know, the modest in me wants to say no, but I think it could realistically happen. So we'll see, we'll see. I'm gonna say
You know,
no though. I'm gonna say we'll see. I think I'll move to like 2.
I I was going to say there's a lot of hesitation there. So,
There
uh,
is. I mean, and there should be. Who knows? Who knows what's gonna happen this week?
yeah, and we're all so close in the points.
Right.
I mean, our records are all over the place, but you have 52 points, Sean has 49, and so we're all just right there next to each other too. But
Yeah.
uh, once again, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Momentum MVP. Follow our Facebook page at MVP Momentum Podcast, and check us out on YouTube at MVP Momentum Podcast. I've been Sam Holcroft.
I'm Peyton Thompson.
Thanks for listening.